Welcome to Harvesting Maine. Harvesting Maine is a podcast brought to you by Real Maine, a promotional program of the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. In episode 7, we're discussing all sorts of connections to Maine agriculture, focusing on fleece, fiber, and making farm products focused in Downeast, Maine. Let's tune in and listen to our guest, Dawn. Hi, Dawn. Welcome. Tuning in from Starboard Farm and literally right there on site in the barn with some of your sheep. Tell us about your farm and who's joining us on the call tonight.
Okay. Well, my name's Dawn Lamoureux Crocker, and I am the owner of Starboard Farm. We're located in Machias Port, specifically the suburb of Starboard, which is just past Jasper's Beach. And tonight, joining us in the barn are the wool crew. This is the wool crew. And this year we've got two new lambs. They're on the ground right now, and I'll show them to you in a few moments. But this is Winston Churchill. He's been quite enamored of Anne and her voice as we've been chatting. I think Winston and I broke up a few minutes ago, and now he's interested in Anne.
He's very adorable, yeah.
So these are South Down baby doll sheep. And I've been raising South Down baby doll sheep since 2006, 2007. And I have one lone border Leicester. So this is my spinning flock.
Tell us a little bit more about why you chose that particular breed of sheep and what's meant by spinning flock. So, to all of us who are kind of really engaged in Maine's fiber shed and agricultural production, we understand what you mean by spinning, but it's not spinning around on a top or anything like that. You're literally talking about making yarn and products from wool, right?
Correct. So my endeavor into the sheep world came after the purchase of 6 chickens. And when they say chickens are the gateway animal, they don't lie. I went out and bought 2 sheep, and without doing any sort of research, I ended up with a breed that really, it was a Cotswold, and they're rather big, and I'm a petite woman, and they were hard to manage. So after I found them a lovely new home on a farm somewhere else, I did my research and found South Down baby doll sheep and did my research for a few years. There was a lady in Augusta, Betty Stover. She owned Spinnaky's farm, and she was wonderful. And she helped me choose my first 2 sheep, and then suggested that I should have 3 because they're like potato chips. You can't have just 1 or 2. They need to have friends. And so Winston is one of my very first baby dolls that came from Betty. And I raise sheep for their fleece. So they're sheared. I send some of the wool out to a mill to have it processed into yarn so we can knit beautiful sweaters like this. And I also do some hand spinning, as well as teaching hand spinning and teaching knitting.
Excellent. And Winston is definitely being very patient as you're petting him and scratching his head inside the barn. It's for our listeners, if you're listening to this later on, it's spring in Maine, and Dawn's located in what we call Downeast, Maine, which you mentioned is just outside of Machias, which is the suburb, as you said, just relative term when you're in Maine. So I'm sure you all are very cozy in there in the barn. And then there's also some of the flock is eating at their manger, eating some hay. And I'm curious to know more about the shearing and, kind of the removal of the wool. When does that process happen? And what are the particular benefits to that?
Okay. With the baby dolls, I shear them, or they get sheared once a year. My attempt at shearing was very unsuccessful because the wool needs to be sheared well, no second cuts or the mill won't work with it. So I hire somebody to do that now. And Emily comes once a year to shear the baby dolls. And the wool is then soon sent out to the mill. They're probably going to get, I'll call Emily. She'll probably come in April. She'll fit me in sometime in April. And they're looking forward to it. They're rubbing. It's seems to be a little bit warmer already for them, but they're already rubbing, and they're rubbing some of the wool off. So we want to get that taken off soon. So the benefits of that, well, let's see. What's the benefits? Mom gets sweaters, right? You guys are cooler. And, it's just healthier for them, to have it cleaned up, right? It's a long winter playing in the mud.
But it keeps them definitely warm. So it's basically like a 12-month, jacket that they've been developing over from last spring to now. And they'll grow that out. They also, I think we've talked about this before, Dawn, are they spending some time outside in the winter, but also in the summer, going to different grazing sites? Is that?
So you brought up the fact about, them keeping them warm in the winter. The Southdown baby dolls are super sturdy in many aspects. And they're just really well bred for this particular area. And it could be minus 30 degrees out. And I know I've had people drive by my farm and think, what a horrible person, why are they not in a barn? They actually hate being in the barn. They're a little angry with me now because I have locked them in here with me so they could be on the podcast, and I'll open it and I'll let them out later. But Winston's been out in the rain, and I stick my hand in his fleece, and you can't feel the water. Excuse me. Thank you. You can't feel the water.
I got a little excitement in the background.
Off the top layer, and so it's the same with the snow. It'll build up on them, and it doesn't penetrate. So in the summertime, they get to go to my friend's farm. She lives at the end of the road, and it's Point of Maine, and it is a peninsula that's accessed on the low tide. And they get to spend their summers vacationing with Aunt Kathy. And Kathy has sheep as well, not Cotswolds, Coopworth, some Nash Island. And that's where the kids go for the summer. And then they come, and what's great is it keeps their fleece really, really clean. They'll come back here sometime in December, and they winter here. They lamb. And as soon as they're sheared and there's enough pasture, we pack them back up and we take them back over to the point. So they have a really rough life.
It almost is kind of the story of fairy tales, nonfiction as well, particularly being Downeast. I always think of, whenever I think of sheep and lambs and animals, I think of all the writers from Maine who have talked about that. And E.B. White certainly comes to mind from your neck of the woods. There's another kind of connection that is really interesting to me. So we've talked with a lot of different farmers, fiber growers, and so on and so forth. But you've mentioned your sweater, and there's this really kind of fascinating connection that I found with people who might not raise sheep. They might not raise alpaca or other fiber materials for harvesting, but they're very into the designs and the creating and the making. Tell us a little bit more about that connection.
Okay. So this particular sweater, this design comes from a Maine designer called Jennifer. Her name is Jennifer Steingass. I've never met Jennifer, but I love her patterns, and I've knit several of her sweaters using our wool. And I have designed a few of my own. I've designed a pair of socks and also a sweater that has blue lobsters on the bodice, similar to this one. It's something about the connection to the place, the maker's connection to where they're raising their, where we're raising the sheep. And there's certain things that just inspire you, as a farmer, as a person who lives in this area, and within the design. And I noticed that in a lot of Maine designers and the knits, that they make, or even when they're choosing, say it's someone else's pattern, but they're taking yarn from, it was an experience. I bought this yarn at this farm, and it's a memory. It's a memory of a trip somewhere, or they chose colors that reminded them of their vacation. And so I find it interesting when I meet people when they come to the farm. So many summer people, they're interested in looking for yarns that when they make something, they're going to look at that later on and say, hey, I bought this yarn when I was on that vacation in Maine that time. And it just brings back, it brings back a lot of memories. And I've kept a lot of connections. It's amazing. I've already have people that are contacting me who I've met over the last 5 or 6 years in this area. They're already messaging, is the shop going to be open? Are the sheep going to be there? And so in that, I've also made connections, with some really fantastic people.
Yeah, that's really special. I think that highlights kind of one of the reasons we're focusing on the connections in agriculture in season 2 of the podcast. Could you speak more about like what it has taken to build up your shop and keep those relationships going? Because
So,
some of these are people who you only get to see during the summertime or maybe in the fall when they come for a visit. What have you been able to set as goals, and how have you gone about that?
prior to buying this property, I bought this property 7 years ago. I had a choice between going to Iowa or staying in Maine, and Maine has my heart. Machiasport was a town that I had lived in previously, and there was nowhere else I wanted to live. This is my home. The people here are my family, and I knew that this was where I wanted to stay. And so I found this house by chance, and purchased it, and we began clearing the sheep helped clear the acreage, and it's taken 7 years to just keep building and making those connections, changing, tweaking, figuring out what I want to do. But COVID, when COVID hit, that really gave me a kick, because as many farmers know, the rug was pulled out from underneath a lot of us. And you had to be really creative and figure out, well, what are we going to do now? And so in talking and watching other farmers through Instagram or people that I'd made connections with and on Facebook, I ended up opening a shop at the end of my driveway to offer curbside sales for those. And we found a lot of people weren't just coming in the summer, they were escaping from the cities, coming here even in the dead of winter. And so we were able to provide them with different different services, and yeah.
A lot of effort behind it too, right? It's not just
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of steps forward and steps backwards, but here we are.
yeah, well, congratulations on that. I know that was a big success for opening the store last year. So it's always fun to see the big steps forward that do come with the territory of farming. Um, you mentioned that you also like to kind of help people learn how to use the yarn and the fiber products.
Mhm.
What has inspired you to do that, and what does a day in the life of a workshop look like for you and attendees?
Okay. In the past, I used to teach some soap making classes at the Cobb's Cook Community Agency, Cobb's Cook Community Learning Center. I better get that right. And I love to teach. I love teaching people to do things that they don't think that they're capable of doing, and mostly the knitting. I'll hear people say, "Oh, my grandmother knit, my mother knit." I could never figure that out, but I'd love to knit. And so this summer we'll find more workshops. We'll have sock knitting workshops for advanced knitters, beginner knitting workshops, and even a soap making workshop. But the curriculum it's kind of like going to school. Every day's a school day. You'll show up. You'll learn to use the tools. You'll learn the basic stitches, the different types of yarns, and how to gauge, how to swatch, right?
Do the sheep help supervise the gauging and the
They're more,
swatching?
yeah, they're more of a distraction than anything else. If folks come, it's can we go see the sheep? So I haven't offered a lot of workshops in the past, um, until recently, where I got the building. People have been asking. We did Arts at Starboard this year, where I invited artists in the area to come and bring their artwork, and set outside of the shop and be able to sell some of their products. And that's the other. I'm going to get off on a tangent, Anne. Sorry, I do that.
Go for it. We love tangents.
Take my turn, and there I am. What I really wanted to mention about the shop, what I love about the shop is that it's a space for local people to sell their products. So last year I had 7, and I think I'm going to be up to about 12 local artists, craftspeople, farm. So we're going to have cheeses and bakery goods, and from baskets to handmade stuff to yarn to soap. It's growing, and it's just a nice space to offer local people to sell their products.
Right, because, excuse me, when we think about what it takes to set up kind of a shop or a retail area, that's another layer of resource or business management that is on top of the farming side of things too. So I'm sure that they're very appreciative of being able to have you kind of help organize that. And how did that come about? Was that something that the pandemic also led that into, or tell us more about that?
It was a combination of being creative during the pandemic, because hearing folks say who normally went to craft shows, we can't do craft shows anymore. We can't. We have an area in Machias. It's called the Dike, and it's like the mile long. Everybody sets their tables up. It's fantastic, and you don't know what you're going to find. If there's antiques, there's home baked goods, there's seafood. And I think at that time people didn't feel comfortable doing that either. So it was twofold. It was that, and I was the recipient of the Gracie Fund a few years ago. And for anyone who's not familiar with the Gracie Fund, it's a scholarship that offers folks who went on to secondary education. So I got my master's degree in environmental science, and they're hoping to hold people here in Washington County. So instead of leaving Washington County and working somewhere else, encouraging you to stay here. And part of that, part of accepting that scholarship was giving back to my community. And this came to mind, this building being able to offer. So I took that money, bought this building, and then opened it so local people could have a space to sell their product.
That's amazing, because we hear so many. We've got a little guy who's going
Yeah.
over to the manger, little lamb. We hear so many kind of startup businesses partnering up, and particularly in that part of Maine. So for many of our listeners, if they're tuning in from Maine, they might understand how rural parts of Maine can be, Washington County being a great example. But there's also a lot of creativity and entrepreneurship that's happening, so it's exciting to hear that that's part of the connection. How did you identify the particular businesses you wanted to kind of feature? You mentioned some cheese makers and some basket makers. Tell us about that too.
So the cheese making, I can't reveal that yet, because that'll be this year, and I'm talking to a local cheese maker, and they will be selling their cheeses in the shop this year. We have a refrigerator. The local basket maker is my very best friend of 23 years. He'll probably get mad at me because I think that might be off. And that he is Great Falls Baskets, and he makes Nantucket style baskets. He weaves Nantucket style baskets. And so we had his baskets in there. We had Pieces of Maine jewelry. My mother, who sews and knits, so she had her pot holders and her quilts. And Kathy from Point of Maine makes fantastic jams and jellies and the best Anadama bread around. And it was just, people would stop by and I'd say, oh, that's right, you make that, would you like a space? And it worked out. And so now I'm clearing things out so I can make more spaces. And so I've asked a local girl, she has a bakery, and I'm hoping that we can do a 1-day bakery day where she brings mixed bakery boxes for to sell in the shop. And it's just, I don't know, it's growing. It's great. I'm going to need a bigger building.
A good problem to have. So so right now you've got a very affectionate flock member here who's coming in for some pets and scratches. Tell us a little bit more about the sheep that you're giving the scratches to right now, Dawn.
This is Winston Churchill, and he is one of my first baby doll sheep that I purchased from Betty. And Winston is about 9 or 10 years old. Baby doll sheep, usually I'd like to say they're about the size of a Labrador, but Winston's a little bigger. And because Winston gets to stay with the girls because he's what we call a wether, he didn't meet confirmation for breeding, but I loved him so much. He had such a great personality that he had a little procedure so he could stay. And so we call him Uncle Winston. And but he's a little bit larger. He's a little bit larger for the breed. He just didn't meet the confirmation, but he's got fantastic wool. He's very friendly because he's been babied since the day I got him. And
Because he's one of your first
right,
flock members.
young, no, not this one. No, she's laying down over there. Una, the other one. They were the first two. They're about 10 or 11 years old. And they're just living their best lives. They're just living their best lives. Yeah. But yeah, he's very affectionate.
How did you select other, kind of flock, the conformation side of things? If you want to build out your flock, are you using
Right.
raising your own rams, or do you connect with other, shepherdesses or shepherds?
So I have two rams in out back. They're not in here for obvious reasons. And that is Oscar and his son Onslow. Again, they met all the confirmations. I also do genetic testing, so I'm checking their. I don't want to get too technical, but I'm looking for a specific codon in their genetics, and that's something we get into later. But so the rams are out back, and this year, because of COVID, I took a break for a year. I was afraid to breed because I was afraid I wouldn't sell. And then I didn't know what the price of hay. And, you're just thinking about all these things when you're trying to go to sleep at night, or at least I do. And I just thought I better not breed this year. So I did take a year off. But I have a friend named Kirsten who owns Hostel Valley Farm in Liberty. And she had two rams that needed some ladies. And so I sent two of my girls up there. And the end of April, we'll have more lambs born. So again, making connections with other farmers. And so we'll build the flock out that way. One of the ewes will come back here because she won't be able to use any of the ewes that are born, but they can be sent back here. Hello, Madeline. And any of the rams that we'll sell. I'm shocked at the amount of people that contact the both of us each year looking for these specific sheep. We have a waiting list that's 2 years long.
Wow.
Yeah. So, hello, kids. Yeah. And I feel bad turning people away, but it's just, and then they find out where you live and they calculate that. They're like, that's 12 hours away.
So you're getting people who are, maybe just on the other side of the Maine border, if not further south. All across the Northeast, it sounds like.
I had a lady come from Pennsylvania one year. She bought 5 lambs from me, and she made the trip, and we've become great friends, and so our stock is being bred in Pennsylvania.
Wow. Tell me a little bit more about that. Let's get into the technical side of things. When you're making these selections, it sounds like it's because you want to obviously have strong genetics. Does it also impact the fleece or the the personalities of the animals?
It does. I'm looking at both the fleece and the personality. So for example, despite the fact that Oscar, who's the father or the father of most of the the 2-year-old lambs that I have over there that you can't see right now, he has fantastic fleece. He and I don't get along, but he has fantastic fleece, so that saved him. And but temperament's important too, right, Winston? Temperament is important. And so those are the two things that I'm looking for me specifically. And then there's people that are looking, they don't care about the conformation. They just want them for pets.
Mm.
They're not even knitters or spinners. They just want to have sheep. They want that experience, hobby farming. And so yeah.
What is it like if someone comes to you and they want to kind of go from the step of, I have had a Labrador retriever, and then I want to do my hobby farm. And then there's kind of the home setting, farm setting. And then there's like really larger scale commercial and, kind of finding wholesalers. Getting
Right.
to the hobbyist side, what are some tips that you would offer them?
Oh, tip. Well, the number one tip that I don't think a lot of people realize is that there's amount of space that sheep require. And they require a lot more than just, a postage stamp or a backyard. I mean, these gals rotate. They'll leave here. They go to one field, one pasture down the road, and they chew that down before they even head out to the point of Maine. They require a lot of space. Hay is, they don't understand how much it is for hay. The price of hay went up exponentially this year, at least for us, or at least for these guys. Come here.
The lamb joining
I would
us.
say just go, most of the time I just tell people go slow. Look, do yourself a favor and let's start with chickens. And if you can handle chickens, then you're fine. If you can handle chickens, then come back and talk to me. But come spend time with me and see what this is one of the ram lambs that was born. Yes, I'm I encourage people to come spend time and see. When I sell my lambs, there's an extensive contract with stipulation that if you can't keep your lambs, you need to contact me and I will come get them.
Yeah.
I don't want them ending up, and I'm very fussy. I mean, I'll ask a lot of questions. Where are you going to keep them? I want to see photos. Here's a manual. I want you to read it. That does deter some people. Some people I don't hear from again, and I'm okay with that. Make sure that they're going to a good home and that they're going to be they'll be taken care of. Somebody's hungry. Get out of the way.
Yeah, it's nursing time for one of the little lambs.
Yeah, it's live TV.
It's farming. We've definitely have had interviews with farmers in their sugar shacks, or I think there was an instance where they were calling from their kitchen after cleaning out the barn. So, or it's all par for the course. Farming doesn't really take a break, right? That's part of it. So, tell me a little bit more about this manual. It's fascinating to me because we hear a lot of people just telling us how all the steps that they need to take to, care for even vegetables or maple syrup production or cheese making. What are the kind of steps that you take? Let's just take a day in your life. Walk us through that.
Geez. Well, most days I'm up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. The geese I also raise dewlap Toulouse geese. So they're anxious to get out, but it's, you're up and it's tending the chickens, tending the geese, and then taking care of these guys. And it's filling 5-gallon water buckets, and getting the hay and a little smackerel of grain now and then. I think people get disappointed when they get sheep because they think that's going to be like an all-day thing, and it really isn't. Once you get it sort of maintained, you're sitting and you're like, oh, well, okay, it's over. I fed everybody. I did everything in a half an hour, and now I can go do everything else. But sheep just kind of go out in the field and they're indifferent as long as you're giving them their hay and their water. You can sit and watch them all day long, but it's like I said, it's taken me 6 or 7 years of just, getting everything set up properly so it's easy to take care and maintain. And fencing is really important. They got loose. Fortunately, my neighbors, the Lynx, they're fantastic. They have horses, and I was at work. I was teaching at the local school, and I got a text message, and she says, "Your sheep are loose, and they're running down the port road." And this is what's great about this town. And I said, "Well, the grain is in the bucket," and she and her daughter got them all in for me. And I think at that time I had 15 sheep, and but that's just our community and everybody helping each other out. So
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of the other piece of it that, you mentioned is it's not like the daily grind of, there's the routine, it's like brushing your teeth or making sure you're fed, but it's the other stuff that takes the time when you're caring for animals and kind of the unexpected, right?
yes, like that. Loose. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe nosing. So in the back, you'll notice there's a different sheep. She's not a baby doll. And
Yeah.
this is Madeline the Great. So Madeline came from October Woods Farm, which is down the coast a ways. My friend Rachel Carter owns that farm. And when Rachel raises registered border Leicesters, and when she finds that she has a sheep that she's not able to breed, she'll contact me. And so this is the second border Leicester that I've had from Rachel. And usually they'll come and they live their best life by the ocean. And I'm able to put them in with the rams because supposedly they're not breedable. Well, surprise.
You've got a mama.
Oscar, and we ended up with, which turns out to be a fantastic mistake because, hello, Winston, they have the most beautiful fleece. And so we may be onto something. We may be onto
So,
something.
so you've got a crossbreed of the Border Leicester with the baby doll.
Right. So already the fleece is soft and spun. It's like butter. It's like butter, and I can't wait. It may have been the best mistake ever. And yes, those are not registered or full bred baby dolls. Those are half and halves, and they will be staying. They're staying here with me. I'm not selling them. We've had multiple offers, but sorry, kids, they're staying. So
Yeah. So you mentioned the fleece is like butter, and does that I presume that leads to a nice fine product, a nice hat or mittens, or
yes,
how does that relate to kind of the finished goods that we
right.
might buy from a
The
farmer?
the micron count of a baby doll, when you hand spin it, and the micron count just means the quality of the wool. So I like to call it the softness factor. I would wear hats and mittens knit from baby doll next to my skin.
Mm.
And then there's Romneys, and I love Romneys. I had a few Romneys, but it's a little more rustic wool. So I would probably still wear that as a hat, but I might line it. I would probably wear a long sleeve shirt underneath a sweater that I'd knit from Romney. So with this particular wool, and this will be lamb's wool, already I'm feeling just the softness, the sponges. I feel like it will be something that you could wear close to the skin, and could be will hopefully be a really nice product. That's my hope. So
Yeah. And there's a purpose for all of the types of fleece and fiber, right? So
right.
there's always something that you could do with
And I don't
whatever's
know
short.
it all. I'm sure there's a lot of sheep people right now. I probably Googled a bunch of stuff along the way, but these are the two breeds that I really know the best.
Yeah.
Merinos. I like to buy Gotland fleece from another farm in the state, Riverview or Rivercrest Farm. Anyhow, they have Gotlands, and I spin that and I knit socks. It's got fantastic durability for socks.
So you're combining different production,
Right.
basically raw fleece or harvested fleece from different breeds to
Well,
make it.
I'm really trying to promote Downeast wool as much as possible, but Maine wool in particular. I'll drive around in the summer, or I'll go to some of the fiber frolics or the fiber fests or the state fairs. And Madeline, that's not nice. And buy raw fleeces, and um, and again making that connection with Maine farmers, contacting them later on and showing them what I made, with their fleece, and just giving a fellow farmer some support.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It is, again, highlighting that connection side of things. What about this activity? We talked about the fiber frolic. We've got an excitable little lamb here. The fiber frolic is one place. Are you going there to kind of network beyond finding the different fleece, but are you going to learn about techniques for?
Ann. I got it's kind of smacked me in the nose, and I got a nosebleed.
It happens. We're doing live from the farm.
Off to the side for a minute while I take care of that.
We'll interview the sheep. Looks like they've got some good answers to the fiber production.
Well, there. I'm not going to the Fiber Fest this year. Well, I was going to. My friend Gabby Ironman actually took over the Fiber Fest, or the Fiber Frolic. I'm sorry, I wanted to get that right. The Fiber Frolic. She contacted me the other day. It's unfortunately happening during a time I'm not going to be able to make. So I won't be able to go to that. I do go to Blue Hill. I go to, sugar, what's the other one there? Sorry, I'm trying to do this. See, I said it was going to be entertaining. I told everybody to watch this. I did not tell them I was going to get a bloody nose.
It's okay. We'll let folks know that
yep.
It's one of the things that you need to be mindful of when you are doing a podcast.
I'm telling you. Freiburg. I like to go to Freiburg.
Yeah, they have a great, that's one of the agricultural fairs in Maine. They have a great kind of a barn dedicated to fiber production. And so you're able to kind of focus on that too. We've got some great comments showing up. We've got people saying live drama, cute sheep.
And wanted to bring me a tissue right now. They could stop in, but no. All right, I'll be fine.
All right, well, we're all back in action. You've got,
I think.
It looks good to us.
Okay, thanks. I promise entertainment, and there it is.
So let's get thinking about that, kind of what is happening when you're talking with these fiber producers. I'm curious to know more about kind of the techniques that you all are discussing, and help me learn this too, because my knowledge is pretty limited when it comes to all these techniques that you put in place to spin and all the tools that you need to do. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. Generally, when I'm going and speaking, and pardon me, folks, I think we're almost done. I'm just curious. I'm asking them why they chose that breed, what they love about that breed, what they're using the wool for. And of course, you have to remember that people aren't raising sheep just for wool. They're raising it for lamb. There's a lot of people that raise dual process sheep, so you can shear them, but then also, you're using them for food. But I'm fascinated with the folks that raise the long wool breed, which is like what Madeline, Border Leicester, and Gotland's, and just learning how they're processing or how they're marketing. Most of the sheep farmers that I talk to we're sort of out of the way, like you mentioned before. Downeast, Maine, you can't get there from here. It's we're kind of out of the way, and so when they're marketing their fleece, they're closer to, I guess, outlets that they'll have a better opportunity, and so it's a little more difficult being where I'm located. And so I'm looking for different ways to market, but also help other people who want to raise sheep in this area, convince them that you can do it and it can be done. but just trying to find that market.
And part of that must be, you've talked about your training, your background, you have the environmental science degree, you've learned on the go too, but there must be other kind of resources that you need to raise and care for these sheep, like maybe veterinarians or
Right.
finding the hay.
So that's always fun. We don't currently have a veterinarian in town, not even a small veterinarian, and certainly not a large veterinarian. So I do all of my own vetting, which
Mm.
is, I mean, unfortunately, if somebody has to be euthanized, we do it. All of their shots. If we have difficult births, I'm, in there turning lambs, pulling lambs.
You're the midwife,
I am
basically.
the midwife. I am the sheep midwife. I've put my hands in places. I just yeah, I'm not trained for this, but I just short of shearing, because like I said, that's the one thing I'm not good at. I trim hooves. I everything that needs to be done just short of major surgery and shearing. I do it, but I had to learn from other farmers, YouTube. I'm not even joking. Like, I've learned an enormous amount of information off of YouTube. Um, and I've made some connections with some sheep farmers in Shetland, of all places, and have gotten some really great information from them. So it's just having a network of people that you can depend on, that you can call on, um, and that have been in it for a while.
Yeah, that's very common no matter the scale of, we just hear that like that's what matters, and having those relationships has always been key to the success and all these good things. And we're just about ready to wrap up, but I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about your sheep and what you have planned, any big plans for the calendar year in 2022.
Okay. Well, let's see. The big plan, the big plans for 2022, girls. What do you think? I'm hoping to ramp up production, and that sounds so technical and unfeeling and cold. But anyhow, I'm feeling comfortable now with breeding, so I'll probably breed more of my ewes next year, and start filling that waiting list. But the big thing really right now that's going on here is still the shop. I see that growing. I see that growing a lot in the next year, and that's my and the classes. The addition of the space that I'm creating. I have an addition on my house that's being turned into a classroom.
Mm.
Um, so we'll be doing like folk school type, you know, canning, soap making, knitting, spinning, inviting other artists to come here. I have a friend of mine, Lana Kwan. She's a watercolor artist, and she lives in Whiting part time, in Massachusetts. The other part, she'll be coming and teaching watercolor painting classes this summer. So it's just it's an array of different folks coming and sharing their knowledge. I mean, I don't know everything. Sometimes I pretend I do, and but just giving the opportunity again for people with skills, with talents, and bringing them in here to the farm and sharing that with other people. That's
Mm.
what my focus is over the next year, and
For
hoping to
the
build that.
for the farm and the business. What about any more lobster sweaters or knits in the mix?
Oh, I have some more designs in mind, but right now I'm the lobster sweater and the up to camp socks. That's the sock knitting class that I'll be teaching. That's what we'll be making, is the up to camp socks. And up to camp is in honor of my BFF Mike Hoyt. So he's the basket maker.
Yep.
So
Oh,
those
that's
that I designed, to when I go to camp, I wear those. So
excellent. And so the final question that I like to ask all my guests, because we're talking about all the variety of Maine agriculture and its value across Maine and to the state. So here's the question. Why is agriculture important? And why do they have a role in our local economy?
Okay. There was a book I read once a few years ago, and it was called The Town That Food Saved. And if you've never read it, take the time. But it talked about the importance of not only stimulating your local economy and raising food locally, but explaining it went into depth explaining the importance of it and how supporting agriculture is important. You know, you're talking about. I think we may have even witnessed a little bit of this during COVID, the disruption, where all of a sudden materials and foods and things we were used to seeing in the grocery store weren't happening, but we still had our local food economy to depend on. And so I think that right there shows how important it is to have some sort of a solid agriculture, you know, food community in your area, something that you can depend on when the chips are down.
Yeah, and then some.
And
Yeah.
that's right.
Well, thanks so much, Dawn. It has been such a pleasure to speak with you on our 7th episode of the Harvesting Maine podcast. And it has been especially nice to get to meet all of the sheep that are in your care, including Winston Churchill, the original sheep. He's been very gracious with his time tonight.
Thank you so much, Anne.
And I hope that you and all of the other businesses have a lot of luck and not just luck, but kind of get to reach that goal, because we think that's especially important, and it definitely shows some of the connections that are out there in Maine agriculture.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Harvesting Maine is brought to you by Real Maine, a promotional program of the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. You can learn more and follow along at realmaine.com.